Well, good morning, everybody. It's Tom Christie back in the carving shop and starting a new project. If you missed the introduction, this is going to be a Drake Mallard Hunting decoy, cork-bodied, and I'm collaborating with Luke Costilow from Coffee Creek Cork, who supplied this kit. I sent him my pattern, and he sent me back this kit with a pre-cut out head, pre-cut out cork body, a set of eyes, and I'm going to take this mallard through to completion. So we'll take each section on the carving as it goes, and then painting as well to make a complete hunting decoy that I hope to use in the marsh this coming season. So in this first session, we'll focus on shaping up the head. This is going to be a gunning bird, so not a lot of bill details, not a lot of nothing fragile on the bird at all. Pretty simplified paint design so that it's easy to maintain from year to year. But we'll start with the head. If you're enjoying my channel, please hit the subscribe button. That does help me out. It's free. I'll keep it that way. And I'm hoping this project, in collaboration with Luke, will encourage some of you out there to try your hand at making your own gunning decoy. And Luke is going to be providing these kits for sale at Coffee Creek Cork. And he has a Facebook page, Instagram, and a YouTube channel. So get in touch with Luke if you're interested in following along on this project. And let's get started on the head. Welcome back. There's just another quick look at Luke's contact information at Coffee Creek Cork for your reference. I also just wanted to show this picture of Luke's card that has a telephone number and an email if you want to reach out to him directly. The first thing I want to do is some layout work with a pencil, and so I've just struck a center line on the cork body, same thing on the head, and kind of sketched in the cheek here, and the neck is going to neck down a little bit there to roughly 2 inches wide. So I've got my dividers set for that, and I want to sketch on the bottom here the shape of that neck so I can keep that in mind. And it's not exactly a circle on this particular pattern. It's a little bit more of an oval. So I'm going to pencil that in so that as I'm carving up here, I can keep the dimension of this neck in mind and not cut off too much material and make this bird a skinny neck bird. So we got that penciled in. That's going to give me the location of a center point here as well, because I want to drill a 5/8 hole for a hardwood dowel that'll go between the cork and the head. So we'll do that in just a minute. Now I want to do a little bit of taking a look at the pattern, sketch in some of the key bill dimensions here. So I'm using my dividers to get this dimension from the tip of the bill back to where it meets the cheek. And I want to transfer that to the wood. And it looks like Luke cut that right where it needs to be, not surprising. Same thing on this side. So he's really got that dimension set, but it's always a good idea to check your pattern. Keep going back to the pattern, make sure you've got things set where they need to be. Now I want to locate the notch here, and I'm going to get a study bill to get a reference dimension from the tip of the bill to the front point of the notch there. I'll be right back. This is an old Bob Miller study bill of a mallard drake. I've still got this dimension set, and I'm just checking that on the study bill, and it's exactly the same. So this study bill is the size of the bill on my pattern. You need to check that because these can vary in size a little bit, and you need to line up with your pattern. So I can use dimensions on this study bill and trust that I'm going to be the same as on the pattern. Now I want to get a dimension from the tip of the nail right to the front edge of the notch, like there. And I'm going to transfer that to my wood. Get a location there. Take a look at the distance between the points of the bill. That's a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to transfer that to my pattern as well. You can eyeball these things if you don't have a study bill, but it's very easy to get your dimensions off, and it starts looking like something other than a mallard. So I like to go back and use my reference as much as I can. Okay, so we've got that notch located, and that's usually the first thing on a head that I'll carve in. That kind of sets the bill length dimension along with this, and then we'll carve in from the side profile that. So let's go to the carving bench, get that notch in. I take it back. Before I do that, I want to get a dimension on the width of the crown, because I'm going to be taking material off the side, leaving the cheek high here at full width on both sides. So let me get a dimension on the width of the crown. Just one more layout item is the distance from the tip of the notch here back to these points that go back into the face. And I want to transfer that to my carving so I know how far back I need to remove material both sides, right in this area. We'll leave the notch high, take these areas down so they correspond to this return up here. Okay, this is at 2 times speed, and I'm going to use this 1/8 inch ruby cylindrical bit and just go in here and carve out the notch, leaving the center raised and lowering both sides of the bill, and then using the side of that ruby bit to kind of smooth off the bandsaw lines on top of the bill. I always like to start with the notch. It helps me set the length of the bill and get things ready to carve. Now I'm going to switch, this is regular speed, to this 3/4 inch saber-tooth burr, fine tooth. And there's not much to hold on to here, so I've got to be very careful to keep my hands out of the way of the carving bit. But I'm going to begin to narrow the head above the eye there, begin to form the cheek, and I'm going to this guideline that I've penciled in on top. And I can start to rough around the top of the bill as well here. So I'm going to keep my center line intact. Now I can round the tip of the bill here. And you'll notice I'm flipping the piece of wood around as I round the tip, because I want the rotation to be right on the bit so I'm not biting into the end grain and chattering. I'm just rounding the tip there. Taking off some of the bandsaw lines on the side as well. And just beginning to rough round the upper mandible here. I'm going to leave the tip of the bill relatively thick so it's nice and strong. This will be used for a hunting decoy, so I want it to be nice and sturdy, even if it's not 1,000% anatomically correct on the tip of the bill there. The birds aren't going to mind. All right, I'm beginning to form the cheek here. Take that up to the eye. And just taking my time, not trying to hog off too much wood at once. That's why I like using this yellow fine tooth, saber tooth. It doesn't carve as fast as some of the other bits, like a green bit. But it's a little safer in my opinion, and it doesn't dig in as fast, and I like to take my time. That's starting to shape up. Just forming that cheek, getting to the guideline on top. Now we can work the neck down below. I'm using the tip of that 3/4 inch burr to kind of create the lower jowl there and begin to narrow the neck down to the guideline that I penciled on the bottom of the cutout here. So narrowing the neck a bit so we have a bit of a jowl there under the face. This will help us get that nice hourglass shape from the front. You can see I'm going to my guideline down below, rounding the back of the neck here. And then taking that up into the cheek. Now I can round the back of the neck in this direction and work it down to that guideline I penciled in for the neck. I'm keeping this at normal speed because I don't like to rush through burr carving at all or give you the impression that you can go fast. Just need to take your time. Now I'm going to round the cheek down from the eye, and I don't want to take any width off the cheek. We've still got that mark for the bill location, so we'll keep that in mind. Now I'm going to round the back end here, flip it around and round down to the neck here a bit. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'll be doing this other side the same way. So I'm actually going to shorten this or speed this side up since it's just a repeat of the previous. We'll go a little faster that way. Okay, this is at 2 times speed. I'm just working the other side in similar fashion. Taking the bandsaw marks off, rounding the top of the bill there. working the crown down to the width I've penciled in at the top and forming that cheek. Taking that cheek back around the neck. Now removing material to form the neck on this side. And I'll skip ahead a little bit since this is just a repeat of the previous side. Okay, a little farther along, forming the cheek on this side. And rounding in this direction as well. So now we've got both sides pretty well rough rounded. You can see that hourglass shape I talked about. Now we'll do some layout work on the bill so we can begin to carve the detail there. Okay, now that we've got some rough wood out of the way, we've kind of got the hourglass shape formed on the head, the neck formed. I want to do some dimensional work off the pattern here from the tip of the bill to the top of the notch there. Transfer that to my pattern, to my wood. I'm doing it both sides to keep it symmetrical. So that's where that comes back to that point on both sides. A little return up to this point that we set earlier. Then I want to do the same thing from the tip of the bill to the corner where the upper and lower mandible meet. Transfer that. And right now I'm just kind of gauging the distance here from the bottom of the cutout to that point. So I'm eyeballing that. We can check that dimension. Make sure we're in the right position up and down there. Just going to do a quick reference check from the bottom of the cutout to that curl up in the corner of the upper mandible. It looks like I'm right on the money there. Just going to go a tad higher on this side. That should be good. Now we can pencil in that cheek. We're going to remove material in this area. Same thing here. Take material out. And basically we want to continue the width of the lower mandible back into the face here on both sides. So we'll get that material removed, both sides. Back to the carving bench. Okay, this is at 2 times speed, and I'm going to use that little 1/8 inch cylindrical ruby to remove this material in the corner between the upper and lower mandible and go along the pencil lines here and begin to define where the cheek meets the bill. We don't need to take out a lot of wood here. I'm just taking out enough wood to continue that mandible back into the face and then put a little definition of the notch and round the notch there as it goes up to the center line, and then remove the bandsaw lines here. So you can see that beginning to form the shape of the cheek here. And I'm penciling this in so that I can get a look at symmetry and also see where I need to clean up those lines. Now I'm going to shift to a little bit of a cone-shaped ruby bit so that I can remove material down here and make a nice soft transition into the face from the bill. And I can use the side of this ruby to kind of remove a lot of the grind lines, clean things up, round the upper mandible here so it's a nice pleasing shape. Now I want to get some dimensions off my pattern here. And I want to determine this from the tip of the bill to the corner where the upper and lower mandible meet. I'm using my dividers to transfer that dimension to the wood on both sides. Then I'm going to pencil in the shape of the lower edge of the upper mandible there. A little bit of an upturn in the corner. Not much lower mandible showing. Now I've penciled in that upper and lower mandible separation. I'm going to use my Molly organic carving knife. Thank you again, Molly, to carve in very carefully that separation between the upper and lower. And when I say carefully, you get to the edge here, and if you're pushing too hard, you're going to rip right through that material. So lighten the pressure as you get close and score multiple times as opposed to just trying to go too deep too fast. And then I'm going to make a cut back in this direction. About a 1/16 of an inch deep underneath. And then score along this bottom edge. Again, just a little bit at a time. You may have to go back and forth till you can take out that small piece of material. You could paint this separation in on your gunning bird. I just like to separate the upper and lower mandible and cast a little shadow here. Give some life to the bird, to the carving, like that. And then I'll smooth that out underneath, but I'll do the other side the same way. Now I'm going to go back to my ruby bit here and just use it, this is that 1/8 inch cylindrical bit, use it to clean up this corner. The knife removes most of the material but leaves a few rough edges and sharp edges, and I want to make sure everything is nice and smooth and rounded here. I also want to define this where the throat, the chin meets the bill underneath on the lower mandible there. Do the same thing on this side, clean up this corner and the side of the lower mandible. And then carve in this little V shape underneath. And then round back into the face. So I can use the side of that bit for that purpose. The end of this bit has grit on it as well, and that's kind of nice. I use it like an end mill sometimes just to clean up little tight spots. And right now I'm just using the side of it to clean up the bandsaw marks underneath here. That's looking pretty good. Do the same thing over here. Just smooth out this transition so we don't have a hard shelf there. And then round back into the face. Taking out some of these bandsaw lines down here. I'll have to come back with sandpaper and clean this up, but this gets me half the way there. I'm going to use the side of this bit and just take out these bandsaw lines as well under the lower mandible, or most of them. Just pencil that in now so I can see what it looks like. Need to do a little more cleanup work here. You can get some little slivers after the knife work, so I'm just removing those. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Now I want to work on these cheek impressions here, coming up from the lower mandible and also from the throat, and give a little bit of shape to the side of the head on both sides. I'm using this little cone-shaped bit and using the point of that to kind of create a trench, following my penciled guidelines here. And once I get that to a certain depth, then I'll use the side of the bit and round back into the face so that we don't have a trench there, we just have a depression. And that's going to cast a little bit of a shadow. We don't want it to be severe, just nice and soft looking, and it helps convey softness in the head and a little bit of character that you see on a live duck. So I'm just going back and forth. I'll show this side as well. Smoothing out in both directions. This is at 2x speed. Obviously, I'm not carving quite this fast. Okay, you can see a little bit of a shadow there. Now I'll take my 1/2-inch sanding drum that has 150 grit on it, and I'll go over the entire head with this and just shape everything up, eliminate all of the grinding marks, make sure things are rounded. I don't want any sharp edges on the bill, especially as a gunning decoy. It can take some knocks in the boat, in the bag, so I like to round edges so that if they do get hit, it's not quite as susceptible to injury. This is at 2x speed as well, just so we can get through it. I won't show all of the sanding, but enough of it so you get a feel for I'm smoothing things out, but also kind of finalizing the shapes here. So I'll get that done on the entire head and then come back. All right, I've got the rough sanding done. And before I round the crown and get the eyes width set, I want to drill this dowel hole because I'm going to use a 5/8 inch hardwood dowel to help make a rigid attachment from the wood head to the cork body. I just happen to have 5/8. You can use 1/2 inch, whatever you've got. And while the head is still in this flat position, at least I can get stability from side to side. And then the same on the cork body. All right, I got those drilled out, and that'll give us a nice firm bond between the head and the cork body. I'm not going to glue that in now. I want to continue to shape the head now that we have the dowel in place. All right, we've got the head rough shaped, and now I want to set the width between the eyes and get that dimension locked in. Luke's got the eye hole drilled in the proper position, so we have a fixed dimension that's correct from here to here. Now I just need to get the width, and according to my pattern, it's 1 inch between the eyes at the front of the eye. So I've set my calipers to 1 inch, and now I need to, you can see it doesn't fit back to the eye at this point. So I want to carve in a little bit more of an eye channel here. And I'll carve that down until I can slide my calipers back to the front of the eye. This is at 2x speed, and I'm going to use this bullet-shaped ruby bit to go in and create a groove right through the eye hole guideline that Luke has drilled in there for us. And once I cut the groove, then I'm going back and forth, up and down to smooth things out. With the side of the bit. Now I need to check that. I'm not quite there yet, so I need to give it more depth. This is kind of a critical area. I see a lot of carvers, make their eyes way too wide and they look bug-eyed, or inset too far and they look funny that way as well. So getting this dimension accurate to me is really important. You can see I'm going at it slowly, deepening these grooves until I get to that 1 inch dimension from my pattern, and that's about where I need to be, really close. Now I can just kind of finalize the shapes around those grooves so we have nice soft shapes in and out of there. That looks good. Now I'll go back to my sanding drum and just finalize, smooth everything out, make sure I have nice transition in and out of the groove there. We don't want that to be like a deep cut. It'll just cast a subtle little shadow. So I'm working that in all directions to make sure it's nice and soft. I'm pulling that right back into the cheek. And that helps form the cheek behind the eye. All right, that's probably enough sanding to show you, but that's where I want to be. Now I can hand sand. I've got that hand sanded. Now I'm just going to use this 3/4 inch ball nose saber-tooth burr and round the crown. And I want a nice rounded crown. I don't want a Frankenstein look from the front, a square head, but also I don't want to take any more width off the crown because I've got that eye set where I want it to be. Now I just need a nice rounded shape up to the center line. And you hear me say this often, I don't want to buzz off the center line in this process and lose my nice pattern from the side profile. So the center line is about the last thing to go when I'm sanding the decoy. Eventually I sand the center line as well because there are still some bandsaw marks on that center line that have to be removed. But I'm going to wait until I'm done carving and doing my final sanding before I remove the center line. Enough said on that. Work this other side down. I'm kind of going at this slowly back and forth. This is real-time carving speed, by the way, just so you know. You can see I'm pushing the burr away from me, and that's a little less aggressive cut than if I'm pulling it towards me. And I use that a lot, especially when you're doing some delicate shaping like this. I'll use it, I'll pull it towards me to really hog off some wood and then kind of push it away from me to refine the shape. Getting close. And I'm going to be checking my front view a lot as I'm rounding the crown just to make sure I have a pleasing shape and I have symmetry from side to side. I'll keep working that until I'm happy with it. That's probably enough to show for right now. All right, just jumped ahead a little bit here, finalizing the shape. That's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to switch to my 1/2-inch drum sander and just finish the job here. Same thing on the sander. I'll push it away to be less aggressive. And if you pull it towards you, due to the rotation direction of the bit, it's more aggressive, as at least the way my rotation is set. That's the way I like it. So I'll use this to refine the shape and remove all those grinding lines, get the head really shaped up. And then I always come back and do some final hand sanding, some rough sanding with 80 grit paper, and then some finish sanding with 150 or so. All right, jump ahead here, just finishing things up. I'll keep going over this until I'm happy with it and do some hand sanding as well. All right, next I want to set the eyes, and I'm using epoxy sculpt. And Luke does mention not to use acetone on the eyes that he provides. I assume it might make the backing come off the eye. So I'm just using clear water. I'm going to wet the surface and the internal there a little bit, and then put a plug of the epoxy sculpt in the hole. press the eye in place. And I'm going to crowd the front of the hole that's there. And I want a little bit of a downward cant and a little bit of a backward cant. And I'm going to use a paintbrush from the opposite side, since this is a through hole and I don't want to fill the entire hole with my epoxy sculpt. I'm going to push back from the back side until I get the eye positioned where I want it. So it's a little downward cant and a little forward cant. And then I'm going to put a little water on my finger and move the epoxy sculpt around, smooth it out into the surrounding area. We'll cover the eye up right now, but I'll come back and open that back up. I've got an old paintbrush that's filled with epoxy sculpt that is kind of like a stylus now, and I'm just going to use that to push material out of the way and open the eye back up, and then start working the material down and away from the eye and up and away. So I'll keep working on that and keep shaping the eye opening until I'm happy with the shape of the eye and that I've got a good clear view of the pupil, so there's life in the eye. And that'll take some time, and rather than videoing all of that, I'll just jump ahead, work on the other eye, and then come back. Here's just a quick look at the eye set, both sides. And I did find that since it was a through hole, on this side, when I couldn't push through from the opposite side, I just put more material in the hole. That offered more resistance so the eye wouldn't keep pushing in. And I like the way they look. I'll let that set overnight, let the epoxy sculpt set up, and then we can do some final shaping of the eyes after that has cured. All right, everybody, that'll do it for session 1 of carving the Drake Mallard with the kit from Coffee Creek Cork, Luke Costilow. In the next session, we'll work on the body, get that shaped up. And until then, Tom Christie signing out. Good carving to you.